In the summer of 1942, a 13-year-old girl picked up a pen. She was not a queen. She was not a soldier. She was not a revolutionary. She was a Jewish schoolgirl, hiding in a secret apartment behind her father's office in Amsterdam, while the world outside descended into the darkest chapter in human history. Her name was Anne Frank, and the words she wrote in that hidden attic would outlive the hatred that tried to silence her, becoming one of the most widely read books in the history of the world. This is her story. Anneliese Marie Frank was born on June 12, 1929, in Frankfurt, Germany, into a warm, educated, middle-class Jewish family. Her father, Otto Frank, was a respected businessman, cultured, thoughtful, and deeply devoted to his family. Her mother, Edith Hollander Frank, was intelligent and quietly strong. Anne's older sister, Margot, was 3 years her senior, serious, studious, and gentle. And then there was Anne. From the very beginning, Anne Frank was different. Spirited, talkative, funny, and fiercely curious. Where Margot was quiet, Anne was loud. Where Margot followed the rules, Anne questioned them. She was the kind of child who filled every room she entered, with noise, with laughter, with life. The Frankfurt of Anne's earliest years was a cosmopolitan, vibrant city. The Frank family was well assimilated, German Jews who considered themselves fully part of their country's culture and society. Otto Frank had served in the German army during the First World War. They were not outsiders. They were Germans. But a darkness was rising. In January 1933, Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party rose to power in Germany. For Jewish families across the country, life began to change almost immediately. Anti-Semitic laws stripped Jews of their citizenship, their jobs, their rights. Jewish businesses were boycotted. Jewish children were humiliated in schools. The world Anne had been born into, stable, safe, and belonging, was being dismantled brick by brick. Otto Frank saw the danger clearly, and he acted. In 1933, he moved his family to Amsterdam, in the Netherlands, a country with a long tradition of tolerance. He established a business, Opekta, selling pectin for jam making, at Prinsengracht 263. The Franks settled into their new Dutch life. For Anne, Amsterdam was an adventure. She made friends easily. She loved film stars, collecting their photographs. She loved reading, writing, and talking. Endlessly talking. She attended the Montessori school and thrived, but the shadow followed them across the border. In May 1940, Nazi Germany invaded and occupied the Netherlands. The laws that had chased the Franks from Germany now arrived in Amsterdam. By 1941, Anne was forced to transfer from her public school to a Jewish school. Jews were required to wear yellow stars. More restrictions came, month by month, relentlessly. The noose was tightening. On June 12, 1942, Anne Frank's 13th birthday, her parents gave her a gift. It was a small book, bound in red and white plaid cloth, with a lock and a clasp. It was a diary. Anne began writing in it that very day. She addressed her entries to an imaginary friend she named Kitty, writing as if in letters, sharing her thoughts, her feelings, her observations about the world around her. She wrote about film stars she admired, about boys she had crushes on, about arguments with her mother, about school, about her dreams of becoming a writer or a journalist. She was a normal 13-year-old girl, except that she was not. Not anymore. In July 1942, the Frank family received a call-up notice, an order for Margot to report to a Nazi labor camp in Germany. Otto Frank had been preparing for this moment. For months, he and trusted colleagues had been secretly converting the upper floors of the Prinsengracht office building into a hiding place, stocking it with food, supplies, and furniture. The call-up made the decision for them. The very next morning, July 6, 1942. The Frank family disappeared from their home and slipped silently into the Secret Annex. Anne carried her diary with her. The Secret Annex, het Achterhuis in Dutch, was a set of rooms hidden behind a movable bookcase on the upper floors of the Prinsengracht building. From the outside, it was invisible. Inside, it was cramped, dark, and suffocating. The Frank family was soon joined by 4 others, Herman and Augusta van Pels, and their teenage son Peter, and later, a dentist named Fritz Pfeffer. 8 people in total shared the small hidden space for more than 2 years. Life in the annex was governed by strict rules of silence. During business hours, when workers were in the building below, no one could walk normally, flush the toilet, or open a window. They spoke in whispers. They moved in stockinged feet. A dropped can, a careless footstep, any sound could betray them. A small network of trusted helpers kept them alive. Miep Gies, Johannes Kleiman, Victor Kugler, and Bep Voskuil smuggled in food, books, newspapers, and medicine, risking their own lives every single day. And Anne, in the middle of all of this, wrote about the war, about humanity, about what it meant to be Jewish, about what she hoped the world could become. On July 15, 1944, less than 3 weeks before the Gestapo came, she wrote, "It's utterly impossible for me to build my life on a foundation of chaos, suffering, and death. I see the world gradually being turned into a wilderness. I hear the ever-approaching thunder, which will destroy us too. I can feel the sufferings of millions. And yet, if I look up into the heavens, I think that it will all come right." She was 15 years old. Anne's last diary entry was written on August 1st, 1944. 3 days later, on the morning of August 4th, 1944, a German security police officer arrived at Prinsengracht 263 with Dutch officers. Someone had informed on the Franks. To this day, the identity of the betrayer has never been conclusively proven. The bookcase was discovered. The annex was found. All 8 people in hiding were arrested, along with 2 of their helpers. They were taken to Gestapo headquarters in Amsterdam for interrogation. Miep Gies returned to the emptied annex and found Anne's papers scattered on the floor. She gathered them up, the diary, the notebooks, the loose pages, and kept them safe, hoping one day to return them to Anne. In August 1944, the 8 prisoners were transported to Westerbork, a transit camp in northeastern Netherlands. On September 3, 1944, on the very last train to leave Westerbork, they were deported east, to Auschwitz. After a 3-day journey in sealed cattle wagons, they arrived. SS officers selected those fit for labor from those who would be sent immediately to the gas chambers. Anne and Margot were selected for labor. Their mother, Edith, was separated from them. Of the 1,019 people on that final transport from Westerbork, 549 were sent directly to the gas chambers on arrival. In Auschwitz, Anne and Margot were put to work. They were subjected to the brutal conditions of the camp: forced labor, starvation, disease, and the ever-present terror of selection. Their mother, Edith Frank, remained in Auschwitz. She died there in early January 1945, of exhaustion and starvation, just weeks before Soviet forces would liberate the camp. In late October 1944, Anne and Margot were transferred again, this time to Bergen-Belsen concentration camp in northern Germany. The conditions there were, if possible, even worse than Auschwitz. Overcrowded and under-resourced, Bergen-Belsen was swept by a typhus epidemic in the winter of 1944 to 45. Margot Frank died of typhus in February or early March 1945. Anne Frank died just days later. In February or March of 1945, she was 15 years old. British forces liberated Bergen-Belsen on April 15, 1945, just weeks after Anne's death. Of the 8 people who had hidden together in the secret annex on Prinsengracht 263, only one survived the war: Otto Frank. Otto Frank was liberated from Auschwitz by Soviet forces on January 27, 1945. He made his slow, painful way back to Amsterdam, one of the lucky ones and one of the most shattered. He learned one by one that his wife was gone, that Margot was gone, and finally, that Anne was gone too. Miepkes gave him the papers she had saved from the annex floor. Otto sat down and began to read his daughter's diary. He had not known, none of them had known, the full depth of what Anne had been writing in those years of hiding. The person who emerged from those pages was extraordinary, funny, perceptive, angry, tender, philosophical, and breathtakingly alive. Anne had written in her diary that she hoped to publish it as a book after the war, a book called Het Achterhuis, the Secret Annex. She had already begun revising it herself, giving the inhabitants fictional names, preparing it for readers she hoped would one day exist. Otto Frank was determined to honor that wish. In June 1947, a Dutch publisher printed 3,000 copies of Het Achterhuis. The response was extraordinary. It was translated into German in 1950, into English in 1952, and from there, into the hands of readers across the entire world. Today, Anne Frank's diary has been translated into more than 70 languages. It has sold tens of millions of copies. It remains one of the most widely read books in human history, and the most personal account most people will ever encounter of what the Holocaust truly was. In 1960, with Otto Frank's help, the building at Prinsengracht 263 opened its doors as a museum, the Anne Frank House. Today, it receives more than 1.2 million visitors every year, from every corner of the world. People who climb the narrow staircase, pass through the bookcase, and stand in the rooms where a family hid from hatred. The diary was adapted into a Broadway play in 1955, winning both the Tony Award and the Pulitzer Prize. A film followed in 1959. Countless adaptations, documentaries, and tributes have followed in the decades since. Otto Frank dedicated the rest of his life, he lived until 1980, to sharing his daughter's story and to the cause of tolerance and peace. He said of the diary, "I want people to know Anne, not as a symbol, not as a victim, but as the person she was." And that is perhaps the most extraordinary thing about Anne Frank's legacy. She did not survive to become a great writer. She did not survive to become a journalist, as she had dreamed. She was murdered at 15, before her life had truly begun. And yet, her voice has reached more people than almost any other writer of the 20th century. Anne Frank lived for only 15 years. For 2 of those years, she was locked in a hidden attic, unable to go outside, unable to speak above a whisper, unable to live the childhood that was stolen from her. And in that darkness, she wrote. She wrote about hope, about humanity, about the stubborn, insistent belief that people are good at heart, even when the evidence around her said otherwise. Her diary did not save her. Nothing could save her, but it saved something else. It saved her voice. It saved her laugh, her anger, her dreams, her contradictions. It saved the truth of who she was in a world that tried to reduce her and millions like her to nothing. She wrote on April 5, 1944, "I want to go on living even after my death." Anne Frank, she did.